Welcome.
Welcome. If you're on Pacific time like me, it's early, 8 a.m. Still dark
And thank
out.
you for joining if you're on Pacific time.
You're welcome. Well, hi, welcome to the special edition of OpenTelemetry and User SIG Live. We're very excited to bring to you a brand new segment called What's New in Otel? I am Reese Lee. I'm a Senior Developer Relations Engineer at New Relic, and I get to work with the lovely Adriana Villela. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Adriana Villela. I work with Reese in the Otel and User SIG, and I am a Principal Developer Advocate at Dynatrace. And like Reese said, this is our very first What's New in Otel. And I think this is really exciting because I don't know about you, but for me, I can never keep up with all the stuff that's going on in Otel, so I kind of need someone to tell me. So this is a little self-serving, and we're basically bringing folks in from the Otel community to tell us some of the cool stuff that is going on.
Yes, and hello, Michael. Mikal.
Hi. Yay, thanks for joining us. I know it's late-ish for you. It's
so by the way,
5 p.m. for you, so thank you for joining, Michael.
Yes, and by the way, I am coming in from Portland, Oregon, and if you would like to share where you're tuning in from in the chat of whichever app you're using, we would love to see where you're from, because there's a pretty good variety of time zones on this call as well. So for example, Adriana is coming in from Toronto.
That's right. Yeah, and you said it right. You said Toronto, not Toronto. Amazing. Yes, I'm from Canada, so representing. So I guess this is a good time to bring in our first guest, Severin Neumann. Oh yeah, sorry. Yes.
So just to give you all a sneak peek into what our new segment is going to look like, we are going to speak with Severin Neumann, and then we're going to speak with Marylia Gutierrez, and finally we are going to bring on Lisa Jung. I don't know why I said Young, and she's going to host our audience Q&A at the very end. So if you have questions, put them in the chat, and we will get to them at the end of both of the first two interviews during the audience Q&A. Hopefully that'll make sense. And yes, like Adriana said, let's bring on Severin. Ooh, Egypt is also watching.
Hey, happy
Hi,
to be here.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, sure.
Where are you coming to us live from?
Yeah, I'm based in Germany. So I'm close to Nuremberg. So yeah, Central European time.
So it's evening for you. So definitely.
Yeah, it's 5 p.m. So it's getting dark again. So summer is officially over, unfortunately.
And then next week you guys get the time change of 1 hour back, and then North America gets the time change.
Yeah, exactly.
Of 1 hour
back. Those weeks because it's screwing up my whole calendar. So it's oh, everything is now at 5 p.m., which should be at 6 p.m. and everything. So yeah, let's get over it with it. So
yeah, well, at least we have one more week of not having to worry about that. So
yeah.
Woo. So do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, yes, sure. So
all the things you do.
Sorry.
Tell us all the things you do for Otel.
That's right. You do so much.
I try my best. So I'm Severin Neumann. However you pronounce it, I always also pronounce it differently when I speak English or German. I'm head of community and developer relations at Causley, and I'm part of the OpenTelemetry governance committee, and I'm also one of the co-maintainers of what we call SIG Comms. So what we do is the website, the blog, the social media channels, and everything around that. So that's a very short version of what I do for the OpenTelemetry community. Yeah, and I'm super excited to be here today to give you a a first start into what's new in OpenTelemetry. So yeah, that's me.
Amazing. So I guess let's get started then.
Yeah.
Do you have some goodies that you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've prepared a little bit of slides, not to like bore everybody out with like a lot of text, and more like to make a few of the things I wanted to share with you a little bit more visual. So I have 3 topics to talk about, right? A little bit Otel in numbers, because I'm always excited about seeing how big this project has grown. And then a little bit about the community, and then a little bit about the tech stuff. I think that's the stuff, the things that most people are excited about. So yeah, let me share my screen and get started with a little bit on the numbers. Yeah. So those numbers are like for all the time, right? So since OpenTelemetry was created, what is it now, 6 years ago, we had almost 20,000 contributors from 120 countries, and like, I call it organizations, but think about like it's like companies and yeah, foundations, whatever, like almost 2,000 organizations. I also looked up the numbers for the last 12 months, which is still like 6,000 contributors, over 70 countries, over 600 organizations. So you see, like, there's a lot of velocity in our project, right? So, and this is like growing and growing every year. And we see it also like with the PRs and like the work that's happening on GitHub. I mean, we have to add here, right? Something like this session here is not recorded by anything that you see on CNCF DevStat, right? There's a lot of work going on in our community that's not tracked on those boards, unfortunately. So also big shout out to everybody doing, let's say, the work outside of the repositories. But I still think like those numbers are impressive, right? Since foundation of the project, we had like those 60,000 APRs reviewed, as you can see, like most of them 3 to 4 times, and then like over 500,000 comments, right? So that means like there were over 500,000 times someone wrote something on a bit below our issue or pull request or something like that, which I think is really great. And like, what's really exciting is like in the last year, I think 20% of those PRs have been just done in the last year, which shows like huge growth. And especially like from the reviews, 30% of them have been done in the last year, meaning like we're leveling up our reviews, right? So we have more and more repositories where we say like, hey, you're not done with 1 review, you maybe need 2 reviews. Or for example, in our OpenTelemetry IO repository, we need a review from docs maintainers and from like the co-owning SIG. And I think this really helps with the quality of the project. And who's doing that, right? So, and this is some number I'm super happy to be able to share, because we build a page for that specifically on the OpenTelemetry website, where we list all the triagers, all the approvers, and all the maintainers. And as you can see, like, those are like people that stepped up and took over a role where they said like, hey, I help us triaging, I help us like managing the repositories, I help us running the SIG meetings. And if you do the math, there's like almost 300 people just having those kinds of roles, which is, I think, really, really great to have. So yeah, a big shout out to everybody who's helping with that, and also a big shout out to all the people I'm not listing here, because there's so many people in our community that are helping, or that just landing in our community and wanting to step up and do much more things. Yeah, and then of course, who is using OpenTelemetry, right? And there's always like 3 kind of groups that we mention. There's first of all, of course, like what we call the vendors, or like the backends. So this is, of course, companies that consume OpenTelemetry data and do something with it, but also open source projects, right? This also includes Jaeger or OpenSearch. But then there's also what we call integrations, right? And that number is probably much, much bigger. So this is just what we have on our website. Those are projects that said like, hey, we add OpenTelemetry to our project natively. So things like Kubernetes has their API server supporting OpenTelemetry, or there's the PHP server called Roadrunner that has OpenTelemetry. And I always love mentioning that one, because like it's written in Go and then doing PHP, so you can even do tracing from Go into the PHP in this web server. This is really something I always love seeing. Oh, and also Docker, right? So if you I think it's Docker build kit and Docker, another project of Docker, like you can see your containers being built with OpenTelemetry. I think that's also very fun. And then, of course, thousands of adopters, right? I mean, every time I'm in a presentation or in a room and I ask people like, hey, who of you knows about OpenTelemetry? Most of the hands go up. And then if I say like, hey, and who of you is using OpenTelemetry? Also like 80% of the people are raising their hand. Unfortunately, this is something we don't have that many listed on our website. So here's the first call to action. If you are an OpenTelemetry adopter, if you have maybe even written a blog from your company where you say like, hey, here's how we use OpenTelemetry, here's how it's helping us, just use that link and you can reach out and we can have you added there, right? So yeah, that's a little bit OpenTelemetry numbers. I think that's just a good starting point. And let's talk about the community. Or is there anything you'd like to deep dive on that slide? I think it's just good to get started.
Yeah, I think I think let's dive into the next topic.
Yeah, awesome. I think that's now more exciting, right? I said I always love to start with those numbers to just emphasize how big this community has grown, and that also means like there's a lot of community updates, and especially like we all know KubeCon is coming, and for whatever reasons, September, October, November is like all those community changes that are going on. And one I'd like to highlight, because like I'm one of the maintainers of this project, is like if you go to the OpenTelemetry IO website, there's now 9 languages that we have started to translate the OpenTelemetry website to. So that includes English as like the base language, but then we have Bengali, Spanish, French, Japanese, Portuguese, Romanian, Ukrainian, and Chinese. I have written it down so that I don't forget anybody. But I think that's amazing, right? I mean, we have like started with that a little bit more than a year ago with 4 languages, and it has grown to 9 languages. And this is really amazing community, because I think that's a really great way to get started with OpenTelemetry, right? So you can translate the things into your native language, learn about them, and then maybe move into different projects of the OpenTelemetry project with this additional understanding. Yeah, then maybe a big call out. The technical committee has added 2 members. So David Ashpole and Josh McDonald have joined the TC. David is like subject matter expert on metrics, Prometheus. He's a Kubernetes contributor as well. And Josh has stepped down from the TC a while ago, is now coming back in. And he's like in the sampling SIG. He is one of the people behind the Otel Arrow and so many other things. So I'm probably not doing him justice, only calling out those 2 things. But yeah, big congratulations to the 2 for joining the TC, and we will see the impact they will have on the project very soon. Then another one, the governance committee election is coming up next week. So we just announced the candidates. If you are a member of standing, how we call it in the OpenTelemetry community, you should have a notification about you being allowed to elect. If you think that you're allowed to be in that election as a voter and have not get, let's say, your access to that, reach out. There's a link for that. Also, you can find it from here to be added to that. There stand for people that are new to the OpenTelemetry project, a new Slack channel that we called OpenTelemetry New Contributors. So if you want to start contributing, go over there and you can get started or can ask your questions and say like, hey, I picked up that issue and I need some help with that. Or, hey, I want to help with documentation. I want to help as the collector. Can somebody guide me with that? So I think that's a really great opportunity to get started. Yeah, another call to action. I think I have a few more coming. So take down your paper and take some notes. We have community awards, right? So we started with this last year, and we wanted to redo this once again. So at KubeCon, we will call out a few members of the community where the community thinks like they deserve an award, right? So everybody is allowed to nominate someone. And this also does not only include like people contributing to the project. This also includes people that are promoting the project in any way, right? So let's say you have a person in your company that's running around and convincing everybody to use OpenTelemetry, you can nominate them, right? If you find 4 or 5 friends in your company and say like, hey, let's nominate that person, let's add them to that list, perfectly fine with us, right? We want to hear those stories. We want to hear about people that are promoting OpenTelemetry. And speaking about KubeCon, right? I mean, the observatory is back to KubeCon. So if you want to speak, if you want to speak with us at KubeCon, I will be first time for me at KubeCon North America this year, by the way. So if you want to catch up with you, if you want to speak with us, you will find us there. I think we also have some schedule and some program there planned. You can probably tell more than I can do on that, but yeah, I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, and if I may interject really quickly
please.
on a couple of things, I wanted to just dig in quickly to the on the GC elections, because that's pretty much open to anyone, right? I know you said like it's happening next week, but anyone who's been involved in OpenTelemetry can nominate themselves, right, for the GC elections.
Sorry, can you now I lost you for a minute.
Oh, anyone can nominate themselves for the GC elections that's been working in OpenTelemetry. Is that correct?
Yeah, but I think the nomination is closed since like 2 days
okay,
ago.
okay.
Yeah.
Cool,
So that's why I did not call
So-
out the nomination. But normally,
Yeah, no, fair
right?
enough,
And
fair enough.
I think even you don't have to be like. So yeah, everybody can be nominated. I think you need 2 supporters, and then you're in. I said it's closed for this year, but next year, yeah, we will do this once again.
So maybe it would be good for anyone who's interested in running next year to just give them a heads up of what the process might be like.
Yeah, sure. So what we normally do is we will send out a blog post, I think end of September, early October, where we say like, hey, elections are coming up. If you want to run as a candidate, create a pull request against the community repository and have 2 people supporting you or saying like, yeah, I think that person is a good candidate. I can recommend that, like, if you want to do that for the first time, wait for the first people to submit their nomination or self-nomination. Let's be honest, most people self-nominate, and there's nothing wrong with that. I do that. And just use that as a template, and then think about like, if you would be elected in the governance committee of OpenTelemetry, which is like responsible for managing the whole project, for the health of the project, for the community as a whole, what are the things that you would do for the project, right? So the GC, just to call this out, this is less about like, oh, I want a collector to do X, Y, and Z, or I want to have, I don't know, added some specific language to the OpenTelemetry project. Of course, from a GC perspective, let's say you can engage in those conversations with those communities, but the GC is much more around like, how can we grow and make our community stronger and better, and how can we manage the project as a whole? So that means like, how can we get projects added to what we are doing? How can we make sure that they're sustainable? How can we make sure that our project is thriving, right? Next year around the same time window, if you want to run, that's where you should take a look.
There you go. And for anyone who's planning for next year, I guess keep an eye on the nominees this year. See what, like you said, see what they've written for their nominations to get an idea of the types of things that gets you elected. You're on the GC, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm. What gets you elected, I think, is like that you show that interest in the community, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's also like very often, at least it's very hard to say that since I'm a member of the GC myself. So what I look for, but before I was member of the GC, right, and before I was like voting with this inside-in perspective, I always looked at like, what have those people done before that, right? Sure, putting on your nomination is the one thing, like writing down, hey, here's the things I want to do for the community, is the one thing. But yeah, it's more about like, what have you done in the last, I don't know, few months to help people with that, right? So that's the thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think from a
Cool.
voter perspective, it definitely helps if you've been visible in the community, and and it could be in a number of ways, right? Code contributions, talks, blog posts, being active in the channels, answering questions.
Yeah, and that's maybe a very important point, right? You don't have to be part of the GC to do that, right? I mean, we need a lot of people to do a lot of work outside of writing all the code, outside of writing all the documentation. There's so many great things you can contribute to this project, and I say it very often to people that want to either break into the OpenTelemetry community or in any open source community. I mean, you have skills already, right? You could be a good marketeer person, or you could be a designer, or you could be a good technical writer, or you could be a good developer, right? And think about the things that you bring to the table, and that's helping you to be appreciated in the community, right? Don't think like, oh, I have to be a good Go programmer to be valuable to the OpenTelemetry community. That's just not true.
That's a great point. And I think before we transition over to Marylia, you still had one more thing that you wanted to show us really quickly. I think you were going to show Otel Unplugged.
Yeah, I have like the slide and another one. I'm not sure how we're doing on timing. I'm talking a little bit long now, so I still have like one more. But let's see that we can get through that. I think people are more excited about the declarative configuration part, but people should be very excited about OpenTelemetry Unplugged. This is like an unconference we're planning for happening after FOSDEM next year. So Monday after FOSDEM, if you're still around, register for this event, and you can like meet with the OpenTelemetry community. There's a blog post on that. Very excited about that one. And then last but not least, because people are asking about that, graduation is in progress. I can share a little bit more in the tech overview. So yeah, that's on the community updates. Let me hopefully go into the technical highlights. This was the text I wanted to show first, right? There's so many updates. I will not touch into anything and everything the Otel project is doing right now, right? So this is almost impossible, but I picked like the things that showed up recently. And since I saw this question coming up very early on when we started like this session today, is like, how can I stay updated? The OpenTelemetry blog is a really good place. And we try to motivate also SIGs to put things there. For example, the profiling SIG, they will come out very soon with like, hey, we are moving towards alpha. I think that's a really great thing that we're seeing in the community. And equally, we had a blog post just recently about sampling, that they're going to adopt the W3C trace context level 2. That's probably worth another what's new in Otel. I tried to do like a 2-sentence summary of that. It's very difficult, but in a long story, to make a long story short, it's mainly about randomness and trace ID to ensure that like there's enough randomness in the trace ID, and that allows you to do certain things in sampling. I can, like, if we have time in the Q&A, I can try to dive into that for a little bit. The mainframe community has been doing a survey just recently, and I don't know if people know that like we have a mainframe community within OpenTelemetry, and they just ask a bunch of questions to like people on the mainframe, like, do you know about OpenTelemetry? How do you want to see it used? And they were talking about like, hey, we need good Python and Java support. We need to see that the OpenTelemetry collector is able to take metrics out of a mainframe. And of course, the question about like what to do in COBOL. I have no more details into that, but it's a very exciting community that like, hey, even the mainframe, which is like a technology for how many years around, probably longer than I'm living, and they are looking into OpenTelemetry just to close this gap for end-to-end visibility. Declarative configuration, I just have it here for completeness. Looking forward to hear about this more myself. And then we have next Android road to stable. So they're working towards a version 1.0. They have done a ton of work over the last few months. So also very excited about that one. There's even a demo app now in the Otel demo with Android. So you can even play around with that. I think that's a really good starting point into that. And they're looking for feedback, right? So go to the OpenTelemetry website, go to the OpenTelemetry blog. In that blog, there's a link to like, hey, what do you want the Otel Android community doing for their next release? And then what I said about like, we are working towards graduation. We met with the TOC of CNCF. There were a few adopter interviews. We were like discussing what are the things to go next. So there's an issue on the CNCF TOC repository. It's number, I wrote it down, 1739. You can look this up. And there's a summary of like, what are the next steps, right? And one big thing, and this is maybe exciting because this is not new feedback for us. They're like, people are looking for like, how can we improve stability? How can we communicate stability better? And how can we look into ease of use? How can we make it easier for people to get started with OpenTelemetry, right? And I said, probably this slide alone would have covered like another 20 to 25 minutes if I would have talked about browser phase 1, the Baylor donation, which is now called OBI, the injector, Weaver, Otel Arrow, they're doing a new phase. We have a call for contributors for Kotlin, a lot of good changes in SAMconf. So yeah, I try to start with that, and I really hope we do those kinds of sessions more regularly so people can stay on top of things. So yeah, this is how you say, like scratching the surface. And then let's dig deeper next time. So yeah, hope that's helping.
This was amazing. And oh, sorry, go ahead.
I know, I was gonna say thank you so much. Like that was really helpful for me.
Yeah, definitely. I was gonna say this proves that we need more of these.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was learning a bunch of things while preparing. I was like, hey, let me ask around and let's talk with people. Like, what's going on in your SIG? What's happening, right? But I mean, our project is growing and growing, and we are adding so many cool things to it. And yeah, I'm very excited about a lot of those things. And again, I only can recommend 2 things. Go to the OpenTelemetry blog from time to time. We have those kinds of announcements there. And if you're a maintainer or contributor, come to SIG comms and let us know about the latest and greatest of your SIG, so we can share this with the wider world, right?
And again, if Severin covered a lot, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat of whichever platform you're tuning in from, and we will get to them after we speak with our next guest. Thank you so much, Severin.
Yeah, thank you. Speak to you in a minute.
Thank you. And we are getting ready now to bring on Marylia Gutierrez to talk about, what is she talking about, Reese? Remind me.
Configuration.
Amazing. Hi, Marylia.
Hello, everyone. Well, continuing the theme of where you're tuning from, I'm also tuning from Toronto. So yeah, me and Adriana. Yeah.
and we're both Brazilians tuning in from Toronto, which is coincidence.
Small subset. That's awesome. So Marylia does a lot in the community. Would you like to share some of the work that you do before you get into declarative configuration?
Yes, of course. So yeah, that is one thing that I was even talking with a couple of colleagues yesterday, that I keep finding more things in Otel, and I just trying to get involved, and I just like keep spreading the things that I work on. So for example, I am a maintainer for the contributor experience. So if you want to be a contributor and you're having some challenges, that will be the group that will help you with. I am an approver for the JavaScript SDK for Portuguese localization, database semantic conventions, and as of a couple of days ago, also for the communications SIG as well.
Yay! Amazing.
Dang, that is so productive.
I know. You're an inspiration.
Seriously.
Yeah, so even like for this one, that we were like, okay, we need to pick one topic to go into deep, like so many things, like, okay, I was working on this, I'm working on that, let's pick one. But I feel like the critical config is something that is really cool, that is getting to a very like almost stable place, and we're gonna see this implementation in several like SDKs now. So I think it's a really cool one to talk about. Cool. So yeah, let's start. So before I start with the clarity config, I feel like I should give a little context, like what is this? Why do we need this? What are you talking about? So how you would set up like your SDK, you're using Otel and you want to set up some specific things for your case. Things like even like my server's name, or like what is going to be my tracer exporter. So how it was done up until now is basically using environment variables. And it was very like easy to do this, and because environment variables is just universally available on all languages. So it doesn't matter the SDK, there was like some way to do this. But then more complex things came on, and like, oh, I need this. And just we just published a blog post yesterday talking about the story of the clarity config. There was an issue created 5 years ago on the Java 6 saying like, I just want to be able to filter out health checks traces. I don't want to keep sending this. There is no easy way to just like filter that specific one. Like I have my sampler, but how do I pass what is the thing that I want to filter? So that starts to get very complex to do just with an environment variable. So we needed something more robust. So that is the idea that came for, let's work on with the clarity config. So at this point, we now disallowed environment variables. So just so we don't keep like adding more when we have to transition. And then we started with now the clarity config. So this is pretty much a YAML file, and you can just put all the things that you care about on that one. It is a little more robust, with just compared to environment variables. It's easier to expand because you can have like all the objects and types that you need there. And because this was a project, of course, I'm the one talking about it today, but there were like several people that were working on this for several months. And now we're just on the phase of really implementing on several SDKs. But the process of actually creating the convention, there is this own like repo specific for this one. It takes a lot of time to get feedback from people and see what's going to work with all the languages. And also people have concern like, I'm not going to use environment variables anymore, but I'm used to them. So you can still have environment variables on your config file. So I put an example here, like how do you do this? And like, if I have this, use it. Otherwise, use this other thing. And to just start using, which is available today in Java and also starting on JavaScript, is I do recognize the irony that you have to set up the environment variable config file to use the config file. I do see the irony on that. And that say like, don't use my environment variables, use the file. I do, yeah, but that's how you do it. And then from that means like the SDKs will be able to just use your config file instead of having set up all the environments. So if you're curious, this is how a basic one look like. So here you see like the YAML. So we have like some resources. Here we have like an example that you still points to environment variable if you care. And then I have like some example like tracer provider. I only care about the endpoints. So this is anything that I'm putting here. And then here the example that I mentioned for like the issue that was created. Like I just want to filter my health checks. This is an example how you do this on Java is already working. And you can see here just like a sampler. And I say like my rule, I want to drop if I have this attribute with this pattern. So it's a lot easier than having to actually you go into the code or your instrumentation, trying to like create your sampler or like trying to have this environment somehow. Now you just create this object and that's it. You don't have to care about like how the SDK would do this. We are the ones that instrumenting like doing that for you. So you don't have to do it. And of course, has a lot of things. Like I'm just trying to like put a few screenshots. This can be quite big. So you can see here like, oh, I have a processor, I have a batch with this schedule, with this timeout, my exporter is this type. And it's a good one that we have a file called like kitchen sink on that repo that every single like spec that is created is added to this file, which is the one that I'm showing here. So if you want to see examples of everything, you have here, and it has the comments of what it means, what are the values, what are like the default values if you don't put them. So it's a great one. And we also have one for migration. If you're like, I just want the basic because I'm using my environment variables and I don't want to have to like copy. So you just copy that file and it's still going to use your environment variables for some basic stuff. If you want to know what is available today, so we have this matrix of compliance, which Java is fully compliant, PHP, JavaScript is partially, and we do have a lot of other languages that are also working on it. I think we just need to update this for a few of them, like for example, Go, and I believe Python also have some implementation. And when I say like it's fully compliant, does not mean that it's ended, it's like complete. That is not what it means. There are still features that still needs to be added, but at least the basic of what you're seeing here is working for those languages. And here I can probably copy this on the chat and we can share, but here I put a few links for resources. So the blog post that I mentioned, which is in English and in Portuguese. So that is like, see, one of the cool things about localization that I already created like both of them. I have the file, like the repo for the configuration and the examples that I mentioned. So the kitchen sink, the migration itself. And if you have question about the config file in general, you can use this Slack channel, so the Otel config file. If you want to have specific for the SDK, so for example, how this is working on the Java one or the JavaScript one. So then you go to those specific channels. So like Otel, Java, JavaScript, Go, and so on. And yeah, that's what I have for an overview for today.
This is great. Now, I had a follow-up question for you, Marylia. So these configurations, it sounds like they are language dependent. So you do them at the language level, not at the collector level. Is that correct?
So one thing is supposed to be like completely agnostic. So you can use the same file, doesn't matter which SDK you're using. But there are parts that are also for the collector. So for example, the collector is already using declarative config for a couple of things.
Right.
So is pretty much like already added there. I don't have a list with me easily to just show what are the things that are working. But the idea is to have like all components will be able to have declarative config. It's just a matter of now we need to go and implement on all those places.
But how does the config file get loaded up? Does it get loaded like as part of? Yeah, I guess I'm having trouble like understanding where in the flow it fits in.
You're talking specifically about the collector or in general?
Oh no, just in general, like the declarative config, like for the environment variables.
So for example, I can talk about like the JavaScript, which is the one that I'm working on. So when you initialize the SDK, usually you do like, for example, new SDK, and sometimes you have to like pass parameter. This time you don't need to do this. So your file is gonna exist on the same place that you're adding your instrumentation.
So it picks it up from, does it pick it up like from, as long as you have that file in a particular directory in your code, it'll pick it up? Is that the idea?
Yeah, so yeah, because the environment variable, it points to the file. So as long as you put this is the path to the file. So when you initialize the SDK, it's gonna check like, do you have set a config file? If you don't, it's gonna ignore and use whatever you were doing before. But if it has, it's gonna say, okay, let me check what you have on that file. And for some things, it's pretty much saying like, if you have this value, I'm gonna use, otherwise you have default values for a lot of things. So it's basically that is the moment when you initialize like the SDK that is gonna read and do whatever it needs to do.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. This is cool because I guess it also lets you, I guess if you're using like just the old way of like just the environment variables, it was very flat, right? And this kind of gives it a little bit more structure too. So it kind of lets you like lump configurations together, which is very cool.
Yeah, because we have a session, for example, this works for everybody. So it's supposed to be like very like agnostic. So now my application is in Python, it's like use the same. But of course, there are things that are very specific for languages, like this, like agents only exist in Java. So, but but I still want to configure this. So the config file has sessions for languages as well. So if we have like this is specific for Java, do this, we have those type of things there as well.
That's awesome. Reese, do you have anything they wanted to chime in on?
I'm still processing.
It's so cool, right? Like my mind is blown. I'm like, where were you like 5 years ago?
Yeah, and the idea is even like for some of the things, you don't have to like restart some of the components and can just like read as is. So it's also that is an advantage as well. But yeah.
Well, I think we can get right into some Q&A because I do have questions and I think our audience has some questions. So Lisa, we would love to bring you on. Hi, Lisa.
All right, thank you so much. Hello, everybody. I'm Lisa Jung, a staff developer advocate at Grafana Labs. I'm part of the communications and the end user SIG. So yeah, now we are gathering questions from the audience and asking our lovely featured speakers here. So the first question is from Cecil. So he said, if you have both options, environment variables or the configuration in a project, which one takes precedence?
So if you do have the environment variable saying like, this is my config file, that is the one that takes precedence. And it's going to use this, and it's not going to use the environment variable as a backup at all. It's like, it's going to ignore that unless you have your config file had the environment variable on that file. But that takes the precedence. If you don't have that environment variable set up, then uses. Even if you have the file existing somewhere, it doesn't know, so it's going to ignore and use environment variables.
Gotcha, thank you. And then we have a question from Kieran. Rust is still a 4-letter word, long way to go, question mark.
For specific for the classic config?
I believe this question came up during your session.
Okay. So yeah, it is. So that is the thing, like, because when people like are creating the semantic convention and stuff, they try to get like people from different like languages. So you know like what's going on, and then you go to your own SIG and start implementing. But a few of SIGs have very small group. So it's hard sometimes for them to handle because they have to like review PRs that come in and do like releases. So it's hard sometimes to do like be able to keep up with everything's going on. The same thing like database semantic conventions came out. A lot of SDKs still don't have implementation. So if you, for example, you really care about Rust, that is your chance to join the SIG and actually be a contributor. So people are really, all the maintainers are always happy to help and have people joining in. You can say like, this is something that I'm interested in and I really care about. How do I start contributing? And it's a way for you to be able to have things faster what you want. And if your goal is to be like an approver or maintainer for small SIGs, that is going to be happen faster because your contribution is going to have a lot of weight if there are not a lot of people helping out. So that is something also to keep in mind.
Gotcha. All right. We have a question for Severin. So what does W3C trace context L2 for tail sampling bring to the table?
Yeah, I said I had to take some notes on that myself because it's like it's a very, very complex topic, and I'm also not like a sampling expert, but I try my very best, right? So we have been doing sampling in OpenTelemetry for I think over 4 years now, and it has been evolving, and like we added a lot of good things. And one of the things that we had is this trace ID ratio based sampler, right? And this sampler had always like, this is just me quoting straight from that blog post, it always had this to do where we said like, hey, all you can do safely with that is sampling on root spans, right? So you had not a lot of good guarantees on probability downstream, right? Because what's happening is that like you use the trace ID as a random n-sized word, like you use some part of the trace ID, and then you compare it to like let's say a boundary that's like 2 to the power of n times the ratio. So you can think about it like if you take 50%, it's like, I don't know, 128. If you have 6 bits, something like that. And if the number is smaller or bigger, then it comes in or does not come in. But the big problem is that like in the trace ID until level 2, there were no guarantees on how many of those bits are truly random, right? Or are maybe encoding some additional information, right? And this is what has been changed in the new standard, and OpenTelemetry is adopting that, right? So you send an additional flag when you use that, and with that you get 56 bit of sufficient randomness, and you can use that, right? So, and again, this is me just talking from a few notes that I took from the blog post. I can highly recommend reading into that. I think if we talk about sampling, we all know that like with the amount of data that people are consuming these days with OpenTelemetry, this is urgently needed, and they need a lot of good hands to also try out those things. So give this a look and yeah, try it out.
Gotcha. And to piggyback on that, Henrik asked, what about consistent probabilistic sampling?
I don't know. Very honest. I'm not exactly sure. So that's like yeah, maybe that's maybe a good thing for the next round, right? Maybe invite someone from the sampling SIG and have them talk about that specifically, right? It looks like there's some interest into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Marylia, Fernando has a question for you. Can I have more than one config file, like a file with generic configs or another with only specific JavaScript configs?
So the file itself is going to be one, because otherwise we don't know which one takes precedence. But for example, if the part that I mentioned that are specifics to language is still part of the same file. So you have, for example, like tracer, exporter, like resources, and then there is a session that we call, like, you usually put at the bottom. They're like, okay, now it's specific, like some resources and stuff for like JavaScript, for Java. So that would be the parts that you have that is specific for JavaScript. At the moment, there's nothing specific for JavaScript, so you wouldn't have that at the moment. But if you have things different for different applications, you need one file for each one. So this is something like, for example, that you can take advantage of some things environment variable related. Imagine that you have, it's exactly the same thing, but I want to have the service name different on those two. So what you do then, your config file point, just say like, use the environment variable for this case, and then you have your two environments that use the different name.
Gotcha. Another question from Henrik for you, Marylia. Would the Otel operator provide a config CRD that could be deployed across Kubernetes objects?
Not sure, because I don't see, like, for example, a reason to add new config, because the idea is to have like all possible config that we want to exist on that file. It's just a matter of like, does it exist already or something that needs to be added? Because it's a little more also about like getting now feedback from the community, just because we have something a little more stable, and say like, what is missing and what we can add there. So those are the points that we need feedback from people. I can check this one specifically, but from the top of my mind, I don't know the answer if we have something already for this one.
Gotcha. So we have a question from Cecil, so please feel free to jump in, Severin or Marylia. Is there any guidance you can share around OpenTelemetry for long-running background processes?
Yeah, I can pick that. So this is actually like a very complicated topic, right? And I just looked it up. There's an issue on the OpenTelemetry specification from 2019, so since the project was founded by Armin around that topic. And the first guidance I can give is open to labor. That's yeah, no worries. Now I lost track for a minute. Yeah, so the very, very first guidance I can give you is like, go to that issue, go to that repository, and call out that you're interested in that, and maybe even interested in helping with that. It's a very gnarly topic, right? So what can you do until then, right? I mean, at the end, it depends a little bit on what does long mean to you, right? I mean, if we talk about spans and traces taking a few minutes, then we are totally fine. You maybe should be just fine with the tracing that you're doing today. But if you say like, hey, and this is the classic thing, right? You have a background job, and maybe this is doing some video encoding, and maybe you want to do something around that. One thing you definitely can do today, right, is use logging and events for that, and maybe announce like those kinds of things, and say like, hey, now I'm starting, now I'm ending. It's not perfect. Right, and let's be super honest with that. And there's probably still of things you need to do on your back end of things. But yeah, you have to work around that, and just let us know that like we need to do more on that topic. So that's the guidance here. Yeah.
Thanks, Severin. All right, I need to stop just reading straight. I need to process a little bit more before like reading the questions out loud. So sorry about that, Cecil. Okay, so as we wrap up our Q&A, I'm gonna ask one question to both Severin and Marylia. So you've been contributing to Otel for a long time. So I'm gonna take you all the way to the beginning. How did you get your start in contributing to Otel? And do you have any advice for new contributors?
Who goes first? You want to start, or should I start?
You can start. You started first.
Yeah, okay.
So.
yeah. Then let me get started. So my reason to start with OpenTelemetry was a very selfish reason, right? And this is something I always tell people, right? If you want to get into open source, have your own good reason to start with open source, right? Have something where you say like, I don't know, I want sampling to be better in OpenTelemetry because like I have way too much telemetry, so let me get started with sampling and then make this thing work. So my situation back then was like, I was in a consulting position, right? And I was talking with a lot of people, what we back then called APM, and we were still transitioning to call everything observability. And people had questions about OpenTelemetry, right? They told me like, hey, what is this thing? Should I use that? Or should I stick with this thing I have already? And this was like every time like something where it was like recognizing like, hey, I have to level up on that, right? So I went to the community and I said like, okay, let me get started on that. Let me learn myself what this OpenTelemetry thing is, so that I can speak better to my users, to our customers, to people that want to get into our product. So I started to help with documentation, help with getting started. I started actually also in the JavaScript community, but then I stuck with documentation because, again, this was the most helpful thing for myself, to just explain OpenTelemetry better to other people.
So yeah, for me, it was basically I have working on observability like in a few companies before, and then I really like, oh, I like this observability thing, and I really want to focus on that. So I was like, I was looking for a job that is basically my job. I only have to think about like the observability, and this is why like I went to Grafana, that the team was like, you have to contribute to Otel. So that it was like, oh, exactly what I wanted. So this is kind of how I started contributing. So it was a mix of things that I found its interest on my own. They're like, oh, I think this is important, I should contribute it, and a mix of what also makes sense for my own company. And I do actually have, I was going to say, we just created a post that I can share here. There's like ideas on how to contribute it, because if you want to, again, you can have like several reasons for it, or like you're just working on something because your company needs or something your own personal project needs and you want to like develop, is something that you just want to learn, you want to increase your network, people they want to meet. So pick something that or really like interested you, like, oh, I already have knowledge and I want to like focus on that, or something like, oh, I'm just curious about things, I don't know what is this, but I want to learn. Can have like both ways and really like dig deep into those ones. That OpenTelemetry is a huge project and like so many components, so many languages. You will find it's just a matter of finding what is your place there, and you can try it out. There is no thing like I pick this. No, now I have to go through this one until the end. Like no, join a couple of calls, just listen in. You don't have to say anything. Like oh, this thing seems interesting. Like continue a little more. Otherwise, no, this is not for me. Go to the next one until you find what is the thing that really excited you.
Nice. Thanks, Marylia. So Marylia, Severin, Adriana, and Reese have been amazing guides and mentors when I was first getting started with Otel. Now I lied, there's one more burning question for both of you. So the question is, what kind of interesting usage trends in terms of implementation, observability stack, docs page views, or anything have you seen over the past year?
I think this is more of like whatever people did not think it was necessarily important before to have observability on. They're like, oh yeah, that would be good if I actually know what the hell was going on. So I think, and then just like time, people keep adding more and more. So it's a lot of old type of applications that people did not think about, like, oh yeah, I should adding, but also new things. But I guess you're gonna find a little of everything. Like people are like really now until like mobile, like nobody was paying attention, or like the browser one that's being really active. So it's just like, well, we forgot to add it. Okay, let's work on all this thing because it's really important. So it's just like all over. So you're gonna find from every single place. And then even things that people do for fun, like I want to monitoring the quality of the air and humidity on my plants. There are people that do this to like, oh no, I'm actually working at NASA and want to know what's going on. So you're gonna find so much spread. Yeah. So that is the cool thing about Otel.
Severin, do you
Yeah, I can try to make it quick because there's so many things I could now answer that I was just thinking about it. Like, yeah, I had now like 5 or 10 things in my head. But let me pick like a few. Like, the one thing is like, and this maybe is close to like, hey, let's measure like the humidity in our room. I saw more also like databases using observability inside the database, right? I mean, we saw like, hey, tracing going up down to the database, but I know that like now people are thinking about like, why not do tracing inside of the database, right? I mean, that's like something I found very funny, similar to what I mentioned before, right? Your Docker build. So this is just this thing where we need to recognize like every software can be traced, logged, and metricked. Is this even a verb? I don't know. But I think you get the gist, right? So you can put OpenTelemetry into just everything and get out amazing data. And the other thing, and then I tried to make it quick too, so that we can get to an end, is like, I think people start to recognize that like with OTLP, they can send their data everywhere, right? I mean, Adriana, you wrote about it. Don't send your traces, logs, and metrics into different places. That's not what I'm talking about. It's more like, hey, wait a minute. I can send a bunch of my data over into that backend, and I can send maybe another portion of that data into another specific tool. And people start to recognize like, they have a lot of freedom with the data, right? They have a lot of freedom with the observability data beyond, let's say, what observability vendors offer today, or what we do with like trace explorers, alerting, and all the capabilities that we had before. And this is actually a topic I'm very, very curious and excited about right now, that we say like, wait a minute, now we have all this data. What else can we do with that, right? I think that's super, super interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, it has been really interesting. And thank you all so much for following along. If you have additional questions, please find us at on CNCF's Slack instance at Otel-sig-n-user channel. There is a QR code on the screen for you to use. Also, huge shout out to Henrik Rexit, who is doing all this live streaming stuff for us on the back end. Thank you so much to Lisa for hosting our Q&A, Adriana for being my co-host, and Severin and Marylia for taking the time to come on and keep us updated. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Oh, and we got a question asking when the next one is. So this means that I guess we'll have to put on another one. We definitely plan on putting on another one, hoping for a monthly cadence. But we also have KubeCon coming up in November, so we'll see. There will be, speaking of KubeCon, as Severin mentioned, Otel Observatory is happening. If you haven't been to the Otel Observatory booth, it's loads of fun. This is where all the cool Otel peeps come to hang out. And we're also doing, as part of a thing that we've been doing the last little while for KubeCons, we're doing a live stream from KubeCon. And I guess it'll be, we call it the Humans of Otel live stream. I guess it will be to a certain extent what's new in Otel. So keep an eye out for that. I believe it's happening on the Wednesday. Let me just double check. Wednesday, November 12th from starting at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. So keep an eye out for that. And I think that's it. Do you have anything else, Reese, to add to that?
No, thank you all for being here.
Yeah, thank you. And also, if you have a cool Otel story to share, whether it's like how you use Otel in your organization, or you have like a presentation that you want to do about cool stuff you've done with Otel, reach out to us in the Otel end user SIG. Again, it's otel-sig-end-user on Slack. We would love to hear from you.
Yes. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.